home renovations, weird lovemaking with people in your family, and the King's Landing equivalent of Black Friday. Episode 205 of House of the Dragon is here with a much slower episode than Rook's Rest. But there are all sorts of juicy new things to talk about, including who the woman was in Daemon's dream, what Mysaria has planned with the Handmaidens, and a wild theory that Alys Rivers might not even be real. Keep in mind there will be no book spoilers beyond episode 205, so grab some goose and like and subscribe. The Dance of Dragons has just begun. We open on High Tide, located on the island of Driftmark. This is the seat of House Velaryon, who has just lost their matriarch Rhaenys, who fell at the Battle of Rook's Rest. A battle that took place just across the bay. Rhaenys' husband, Lord Corlys, has just learned the news of his wife's passing. This is a man who has lost both his children and now his wife. He'll later remark to his granddaughter Bela, "What good is a castle if it sits barren and empty?" The loss of Rhaenys has also hit Rhaenyra. While she and Rhaenys never had the best of relationships, Rhaenys stood by her queen and now has given the ultimate sacrifice for her. This situation in King's Landing is equally as dire, as Corlys' blockade of the Gullet has pushed the city into famine. Rotting fruit and thinning soup is distributed as members of the City Watch struggle to maintain order. Following the victory at Rook's Rest, Criston has the severed head of Rhaenys' dragon Meleys paraded through the streets of King's Landing, believing this victory will raise the spirits of the people. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The small folk see it as an ill omen. Dragons are revered, as this guy states he thought the dragons were gods. Hugh, however, states they're just meat, which is an interesting choice of words considering meat is what the people chant when they're barred from leaving King's Landing. While a slain dragon is nice and all, it's not gonna put food in your belly. Criston's decision to parade this dragon head around also shows just how little he understands the small folk. In the book, the head of Lord Staunton is also mounted above the old gate as thousands leave the city fearing war. It's also Alicent that orders the closing of the gates and not Aemond like in the show. Watching over this macabre parade are two different reactions from Alicent and Aemond. Aemond looks proud while Alicent is like, "Oh great, what have I got myself into now?" Notice how Alicent clocks Aemond holding his brother's dagger, a dagger Alicent herself gifted to Aegon the day of his coronation. This dagger has become a metaphor for Aemond's desire for the crown. It's almost like a baton passed from one ruler to the next, and perhaps he feels it gives him some form of legitimacy. Aemond has told us in the past that he always desired to be king over his brother, and in this episode we'll see him look upon the Iron Throne, that thing he's wanted more than anything. Helaena will interrupt him, stating,
"Was it worth the price?"
It's kind of a creepy thing to say because it implies Helaena knew what Aemond did at the Battle of Rook's Rest. How he didn't immediately join his brother in battle and attacked Meleys even knowing Aegon was in the way. Helaena has had all sorts of prophetic visions in the past, so I wouldn't hold it against her that she knows some of this stuff. Speaking of Helaena, she watches as her husband is carted in. In the book, it's said that this body was hidden in this litter to avoid people knowing the extent of his injuries. If the small folk knew he was on the brink of death, it could cause further unrest. We do not see any effort of Helaena visiting the king, just as he ignored the queen in consoling her after the death of their son, Jaehaerys. The book states that Helaena had grown mad after the death of her son, contributing to her reclusiveness, but the show, at least for now, doesn't seem to be going down that path. Inside his litter is his sword, Blackfire, which once belonged to his father, King Viserys, yet another tool to affirm his legitimacy to the throne. Now his chambers are filled with a slew of maesters, creating and applying different poultices and medication on the ailing king. Part of his Valyrian armor, which surely protected him from certain death, has embedded itself into his skin, which Master Orwyle has to be careful removing. You may have even noticed the presence of several silent sisters on call should the king take a turn for the worse. Aemond is all business as he looks over the incapacitated body of his brother, stating someone will need to rule in his stead. His actions at Rook's Rest show little regard for his brother's well-being, and Criston found him with his sword drawn approaching searching his body in the forest. And that's one of the things I love about this show, the way it approaches certain scenes with ambiguity and letting the viewer interpret the character's true intention. Was Aemon going to kill his brother to take the throne, or was he merely sheathing his sword at the exact moment Criston arrived? The book, unfortunately, offers no answer. When Alicent asks Criston what Aemon's part was in all this, he merely states,
"I could not say."
Criston himself must wonder what Aemon's true intentions are. When he sent the signal for Vhagar to join the battle, Aemon did not arrive. He took his sweet time while Aegon floundered next to Rhaenys. He must have also seen how Aemon showed no regard for his brother during the battle, and Criston, it would seem, does not divulge any of this to Alicent. According to Criston and Rhaenyra, Aegon's dragon Sunfire is dead, which is a major departure from the book. Fire and Blood has Sunfire recuperating from this battle, and the dragon appears later in the story, so it will be interesting how the show handles this change. Things are equally dire at Dragonstone, where the Black Council discusses the aftermath of their loss at Rook's Rest. Once again, Lord Alfred Broom expresses his displeasure that they have no ground army, and Rhaenyra continues to drag her feet. And one of the major themes of this episode is this idea that women cannot lead during times of war.
It is merely that the gentler sex, heretofore, has not been much privy to the strategies of battle.
Both Rhaenyra and Alicent are subject to this sexism, and Alicent, who stood in as regent for years during Viserys' illness, is thrust aside in favor of Aemond. Currently, Rhaenyra has no standing army. Daemon is puttering around at Harrenhal, Cregan Stark's men are marching southward, which will take some time, and Lady Jane Arryn of the Vale promised 15,000 men in return for the protection of a dragon, but we'll get to that in a bit. In the meantime, all Rhaenyra can do is provide support to Maidenpool and Crocklaw Point in the form of stores and weapons. Now, Steffon Darklyn here, the Lord Commander of Rhaenyra's Queensguard, wants Aegon to answer for what he did at Duskendale. Duskendale is the home of House Darklyn and where his father was beheaded. Others suggest they immediately attack King's Landing before Vhagar recovers from battle. But Rhaenyra is the only one with a dragon capable of standing a chance against the old beast, and they can't risk losing the queen. Daemon and Caraxes could also help, but he's MIA at Harrenhal. Speaking of Harrenhal, Jace wants to go behind his mother's back to travel there to affirm his stepfather's loyalty to Rhaenyra. He's also pissed that his mother treats him like a coddled prince. He's here with Baela, the woman to whom he's betrothed. Instead, they come up with a plan to sway the Freys to their side. Currently, the Freys are under the control of House Tully, and as we found out last episode, Lord Grover Tully is basically incapacitated, and the next in line, Oscar Tully, isn't willing to make any major plays while his grandsire still lives. The Freys control the Crossing, this strategic bridge which provides travel along the Green Fork. With Cregan's army of old men marching down from the north, it would provide a direct route to the Riverlands without the need for Daemon to act. Speaking of Daemon, he meets with Lord Amos Bracken to discuss the terms of joining his army. Basically, it's bend the knee or burn. But Amos would rather die than fight alongside their long-standing enemies, the Blackwoods. He even jests to Willem here about the death of his Lord Samwell at the Battle of the Burning Mill. Now, you'd think Daemon would just light all these dudes on fire, but as he'll later tell Willem,
"I came here to raise swords, not corpses."
He needs these men as part of his army, so Daemon hatches another plan, one which must not be traced back to the crown. Although never explicitly said, he orders Willem to commit war crimes, including the capture of Bracken children to force them to his side. At the Eyrie, located northeast of Harrenhal, we get our first look of Lady Jane Arryn of the Vale. At the end of Season 1, Jace was sent to the Eyrie to make a deal in exchange for an army. You might recall that Rhaenyra's mother, Emma, is an Arryn, making Rhaenyra half Arryn. Lady Jane wanted a dragon, considering the only weakness to her castle is from the air. You might remember the Eyrie from Game of Thrones as the seat of Lady Catelyn Stark's sister, Lysa. What Lady Jane doesn't know is that she'll get her dragon, just not a full-fledged adult. In fact, she'll get two hatchlings, Joffrey's Taraxis and Aegon the Younger's Stormcloud. The question then becomes, will Lady Jane make good on her word even though she didn't quite get what she bargained for? Mysaria has become this confidant to Rhaenyra, someone she can express her frustrations to regarding the backlash she receives from the Black Council. Growing up a woman and during a time of peace, Rhaenyra was never taught the way of the sword, and the other members of the council know this. I like how this scene was conducted in front of the dragon skull of who I believe is Meraxes, a dragon who, ironically enough, was ridden by the original Rhaenys Targaryen, one of Aegon the Conqueror's sister wives, and like Rhaenys and Meleys, died in battle. Mysaria states that there is more than one way to win a war. With Criston's misstep carting Meleys's head around the city, it has only inflamed the sentiments of the small folk who are already on the cusp of revolt. This could be used to Rhaenyra's advantage. Perhaps dragons won't be required at all if she can get the people on her side. Rhaenyra has a heart-to-heart with Baela over the passing of Rhaenys. She was a mighty warrior who tamed Meleys when other men failed before her. Rhaenyra uses Baela to offer Corlys the role of Hand of the Queen. Now in the book, Corlys is much more angry at the Queen and blames her for the death of his wife, with Rhaenyra allowing some time to pass before offering him Hand as a sort of way to placate him. Daemon's dreams continue to get weirder as we see him making love to this white-haired woman. Given the following clues, I believe this to be his mother, Alyssa Targaryen. First, she basically shit-talks Viserys, saying that Daemon was always her favorite son, and that she wished Daemon had been born first so he could rule. We'll see more blood on Daemon's hands, which has been a recurring motif in these dreams. Coincidentally enough, Alyssa had been Meleys's dragon rider before Rhaenys. Later in the episode, Alys will say this line:
"It's a pity, don't you think, that you never knew your mother?"
Alyssa died when Daemon was only 3 years old, so all of this is just really super creepy that Alys is making him know his mother in the most intimate way. This is yet another one of Daemon's daydreams as he's thrust back to reality with, you guessed it, Alys Rivers nearby. Whatever hold this woman has over him, it definitely seems she is doing everything in her power to undermine Rhaenyra's claim to the throne. She wants Daemon to go against her, which would suggest she is not Team Black at all. Then there's the question of whether or not Alys is even real. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've seen Alys talk to anyone else but Daemon. The closest type of interaction we've had where someone else acknowledges her is here. But this could just be Simon being like, Daemon, what the hell are you looking at? If this is true, it would mean that Alys is some sort of manifestation of the curse of Harrenhal. The dining room has a mural of sacred weirwood trees which Harrenhal chopped down to build his castle. So we're literally on a burial ground where all sorts of mystical shit could happen. Harrenhal, however, is still in a state of disrepair, thus Daemon calls upon nearby smiths and armorers from Nutton and Riverbend, as well as farmers from Antlers and Highheart, to stock the stronghold with meat and wood. Then there's the question of payment. Larys transferred most of House Strong's wealth to King's Landing, and Daemon is too proud to go groveling to Rhaenyra. Just how he'll amass the coin himself, we'll just have to see. But Alys's hold over him starts showing when he demands that Sir Simon refer to him as king. Poor Simon knows that Daemon is not supposed to be referred to as such. At most, he should be referred to as King's consort. With Aegon unable to rule, the small council debates over who should take over as regent, a title given to one who looks over the king's affairs should he fall ill or is too young. Ned Stark was regent for Robert Baratheon in season 1 after the boar attack. Funny enough, you can find sketches of boars in Helena's drawings. The obvious choice for who should take over is Alicent, as she previously held this title for Viserys during his illness, but in a vote of 4-2, she is ousted in favor of a man. Orwyle is the only one to vouch for the queen, and even though Alicent is more experienced, they believe a man is more suited for a time of war. Even Criston backstabs her by siding with the prince. Aemon wastes no time taking to the king's chair and getting to business. We can already tell he's a step up from Aegon, who didn't seem to know what the hell he was doing. And as the council goes on discussing the matters at hand, the camera lingers on Alicent. This is a woman who did everything in her power to get her son on that throne, and now everyone has turned against her, all because she is a woman. She doesn't even have Otto around to confide in. A few interesting things to note coming out of this meeting. The Green plan to meet with Oscar Tully, who had a rather unsuccessful meeting with Daemon last episode. Jason Lannister's forces continue to make headway toward the Riverlands from the west. Then there's the issue of the small folk leaving the city in droves, to which Aemon calls for the closing of the gates. No one is to leave or enter without consent. Also, let's get those ratcatchers down. Hugh's wife Kat wants to leave King's Landing. With a food shortage, sick child, and no payment for his work on the Scorpions, there is nothing for them here. They will try to leave the city with hundreds of other desperate citizens. The Gold Cloaks have to keep them at bay. No doubt this decision will have consequences as the city descends further into famine and chaos. But as Littlefinger once wisely said,
"Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder."
And Rhaenyra can wield this chaos to climb it. Jace's dragon Vermax watches over the crossing as Jace greets House Frey. We never learn their names in the show, but if we go by the book, the rulers of House Frey at this time would be Lord Forrest Frey and his wife Sabitha. The Freys are reticent to provide their support to Rhaenyra. By doing so, they would be circumventing their liege lord Grover Tully. They are also fearful of Vhagar and thus need reassurance of protection. Taking such a risk would require certain compensation, and they want Harrenhal after the war is over. Jace says Rhaenyra would want them to bend the knee. We never see them do this, but with his mission a success, we can assume that they did. Alys creepily watches Daemon cutting wood. His hands have become calloused and bloody, yet another nod to this blood on his hands motif. Alys says she can hear through the winds the cries of children and women being carried away, the sounds of war. She knows that Daemon has been committing unfathomable crimes in order to gain his army, but as she rightly points out, how good is an army when your men hate you? It's interesting that Daemon claims the people will suffer under Aemond, yet the people are already suffering under Daemon's brutal tactics. It seems these two men are two sides of the same coin. And in one of the biggest revelations of the episode, Daemon reveals his plan to rule as king alongside Rhaenyra, for
The people who support her will not be led by her. They look to a man for strength.
even if he wanted her to rule, he says the people would not support her. They will not be led by a woman, and must look for a man for strength.
Rhaenyra is welcome to join me there and take her place by my side.
Sir Simon notifies Daemon that his efforts have worked, and Lord Amos of House Bracken has pledged his support. A drunk Corlys is greeted by his granddaughter Baela. His once vibrant castle is now a tomb empty. He partly blames Rhaenyra for the loss of his wife, but as Baela notes, she flew to Rook's Rest on her own and died in honor.
And the way I myself wish to meet my end.
Corlys also reflects on his own life, stating that his voyages abroad were all for her, although this came at a great loss for himself and those who loved him. If Corlys really wants to honor the memory of Rhaenys, what better way than to help Rhaenyra ascend the throne, which Rhaenys gave her life trying to do? I think it's a fair bet that Corlys will accept his role as Hand of the Queen. Corlys tells his granddaughter he wishes her to be the heir to Driftmark, but she says she is made of fire and blood and not salt and sea. Lucerys was originally set to be heir to Driftmark, but after his passing, there hasn't been an official replacement. The two names Rhaenys and Corlys throughout last episode were Joffrey and Rhaena. Rhaenyra calls for Sir Alfred Broom. Since Daemon isn't responding to her messages, she tasks Alfred with venturing to Harrenhal to get a feel for his intentions. Does he really intend to raise a host for her or for himself? Rhaenyra still has doubts whether Daemon truly wants to see her on the throne or has wanted it all for himself. Meanwhile, Daemon is rudely awoken in the middle of the night by lords of House Bracken. It is the hour of the wolf, the darkest part of night. They're pissed because the Blackwoods, under the orders of Daemon, have been committing war crimes under the House Targaryen banner, no less. While they have pledged their allegiance to Daemon, they will not raise their banners for a tyrant. These lords definitely have a lot of balls, with one of them saying, "What do you expect from a man who ordered the death of a child?" And if this moment couldn't get any worse, Daemon experiences another vision of his dead wife, Laena.
A terrible war is being fought in these lands. Have you looked after our girls?
Daemon has certainly neglected them in his quest for power. Rhaenyra has sent her lady-in-waiting, Alinda Massey, to King's Landing. She is the daughter of Lord Gorman Massey, who sits on the Black Council. This is an important mission, having something to do with Mysaria's plan of sowing dissension in the city. Alinda was formerly a handmaiden at King's Landing, and so the city, its castle, and politics is no stranger to her. But it's who she sees here that is the big surprise, the former servant of Alicent, Diana. We saw Diana Diana working as a barmaid in episode 3 after she was fired as a servant after being raped by Aegon. Alicent made her drink moon tea to get rid of the child. Alinda and Diana would have known each other as they both worked for Alicent. Alinda refers to her as an old friend and has come to collect something for Mysaria, an old due. Why or what she owes Mysaria is not known, nor is it in the books, as the character Diana does not exist. What if the moon tea didn't work and Diana has one of Aegon's bastard children? Could that child have a claim to the throne over Aemond? Either way, my guess is that Diana plays some role in stoking a confrontation that pits the citizens of King's Landing against Aemond. Alicent comforts Aegon, who has not said a word since his injury. This is the same bed she looked after Viserys during his sickness, and now she's doing it all over again, but with her boy. It's a bit sad that she doesn't get to hear him say the words mummy. Aegon may be king, but he's still a boy that deep down still wants the comfort and love of his mom. The episode's final scene starts with Rhaenyra looking at this picture of Visenya, one of Aegon the Conqueror's 2 sister wives who rode Vhagar and wielded Darksister, the same blade used by Daemon. She sees Visenya as somewhat of an inspirational figure, a warrior queen who wasn't relegated to the sidelines like she is. And this feeling of helplessness is passed on to Jace. He too is not allowed into battle like the Black Council won't allow Rhaenyra. While she is proud of Jace's initiative in dealing with the Freys, she did not give him leave to go. Vhagar is still out there, and if spotted, Vermax would be no match. She fears that Aemond will not wait long to make his next move, and this may result in there being no choice but to risk her life and go off into battle. Unsure of where her path leads, there is one thing that's certain: she needs dragons. But those dragons also need riders. There are currently 2 riderless dragons on Dragonstone big enough to fight Vhagar: Vermithor, who we saw briefly in Season 1, and Silverwing. Using this image from YouTuber Everything Explained, we can see that there are currently 12 dragons who are riderless. While Taraxis and Stormcloud have been saved for Joffrey and Aegon the Younger respectively, in the show we don't know if either of them have ridden them yet. According to Valyrian history, only Dragonlords possess the ability to ride dragons. This is something in their blood. This is part of the reason why Targaryens are so incestuous. But what about riders who are bastards or half-bloods? If they could ride, this would open up the opportunity for new riders to join the fight and sway the outcome of war. Dragonstone is filled with records of the Targaryen line, and they could find out who may have the ability to ride such dragons. What's about to begin is known as the sowing of the seeds. In episode 3, we met Ulf, who called himself a dragon seed, a name for those who have that dragon blood in them. He stated that he was the son of Baelon Targaryen, which would make him half-brother to Daemon and Viserys. But you can bet if Rhaenyra is going to search for new dragon riders, Team Green won't be far behind. Think of it like a nuclear arms race, with both sides working as fast as they can to acquire as many dragons to their side. We've already seen the absolute devastation 3 dragons can have on a battle. Now imagine how complicated things will get with over 20 of them at play. So while Rhaenyra and Team Black may have lost the Battle of Rook's Rest, the war for Westeros has just begun. But what did you think of episode 205? I want to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, and for more bad takes you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember...
Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder.